It's amazing how quickly 3 weeks can change things. If you listen to my preseason videos when I suggested adding Caleb Williams, Quidden Johnston, and the likes of Javonte Williams, you're probably pretty set. But if you're not, never fear. With the right additions and start-sit decisions, every team can be turned around. Every week, I'll be bringing you a video answering 2 simple questions. Who should you stream this week, and who should you stash on the Fantasy First Down? I'm Ben Wasley. Welcome to the Fantasy First Down and the Week 4 Stash and Stream show. To keep things simple, we'll be defining a streamer as any player you wouldn't start usually, but who is a viable option for this week. They may be on your bench, they may be on waivers depending on your league. We'll also define a stash as any player you can potentially find on waivers that you should stash for the future, either because they have a favorable matchup coming up or because they could be a possible future fantasy starter, or in this case, because we have bye weeks coming up in week 5, and you should also be stashing for the future. If you have any questions, hit me up on the comment section or on Instagram or Twitter. The links are down below. You can also check out my rankings over at ffdfantasyfootball.com. But let's get into the streamers and stashes for week 4. And we're starting off with the quarterbacks, and with a heap of quarterback injuries, going to be particularly important for those of you who are still streaming the position. Now, this guy was a sit last game when they took on a difficult Titans secondary, but this week I'm going back to the Daniel Jones streaming well. The Rams-Colts battle is expected to be the highest scoring matchup of the week, according to Vegas, and the Rams have conceded the fewest running back points this season. This will need to be an aerial attack from Jones and the Indy offense, so expect good fantasy production from the quarterback. Meanwhile, for me, Justin Fields is a must start most weeks, but I can understand some concern coming off an injury. Against the Dolphins defense that has conceded the second most quarterback points this season, though, I'm starting Fields regardless. If he's out, though, still hold on to him. He gets the Cowboys next week in another fantastic matchup. Tyrod Taylor would also be a viable low end streamer if Fields is out as well. And I have to admit it, this one was a swing and miss from me last week. But against the Cowboys, the team that has conceded the most quarterback points this season for fantasy, I can't stay away from Jordan Love again. If you're in need of a quarterback streamer who's available in most leagues, he's probably your best option. Yes, the loss of Jaden Reed is a problem, but Green Bay has plenty of backup options, which should put their passing game in good stead against that awful Cowboys defense. This may very well be your best streaming option, as Love is available in many leagues after last week's disappointment. If you need to go deeper, meanwhile, well, there's Geno Smith against the Bears in a good matchup, Matthew Stafford in that high-scoring match against the Colts, and also Sam Darnold against the Cardinals. Meanwhile, if you're thinking about stashing a quarterback, because there are plenty of guys on bye next week, well, there's a lot of buzz regarding Russell Wilson being dropped for week 4. In fact, Jackson Dart has been essentially confirmed as the starter for the remainder of the season. I wouldn't be crazy and start rookie Dart in his debut against the Chargers, but I would stash the youngster in deeper leagues just to see what happens, especially in Superflex. He's probably not even there, but in a deeper league, he has some upside. After all, he has a juicy week 5 matchup against the Saints, and that'll be useful if you're rostering Caleb Williams or Jordan Love or even Michael Penix or Aaron Rodgers. They're all on buys then. Meanwhile, I wouldn't consider starting Bryce Young this week either, despite a strong performance by the Panthers in blanking the Falcons in week 3. But I'm thinking ahead to bye weeks again. The Panthers face the struggling Dolphins, who have been very generous to opposing quarterbacks. If your league stashes passes like a quarterback apocalypse is on the horizon, I suggest picking up Young just in case. Meanwhile, running back wise, and I mean, there's one obvious guy that everyone's talking about, and I'm sure he was very popular on waivers, and he's a great start immediately. With James Conner out for the season, Trey Benson becomes a weekly top 20 option. That starts this week when the Cardinals face a Seahawks defense that's far more susceptible to the run than the pass. Hopefully, you listened earlier in the season when I was suggesting Benson as one of the guys you should be stashing. Meanwhile, I'm not sure what to make of the Ramondre Stevenson benching it could be a 1 week deal or a permanent demotion. It's really hard to know when it comes to fumbles and things like that. I'm taking the risk though, and I'm starting Travion Henderson against a middling Panthers run defense. Though it wouldn't be totally out of the question to start Stevenson as well. It could go either way. It wouldn't surprise me if it's committee, but at least Henderson definitely has some sort of role, whereas Stevenson could be the starter or he could be totally uninvolved. Heck, could even be Antonio Gibson. We really don't know, but we do know that Henderson's the most likely. And if I'm going to be starting one of these guys, it's going to be Henderson. Meanwhile, the Ravens have conceded by far the most points to running backs this season. If I'm desperate for a running back starter, I'd consider either KC running back. Isaiah Pacheco will be the main guy, but Kareem Hunt's still getting plenty of touches. I think in a game where they're likely to be trailing, he could be a guy who's going to get you plenty of receiving points. It's possible both are amazing. It's possible they both totally bust, or one has a good week and the other doesn't. Hence why I recommend this with a significant amount of caution. But if you're a little bit desperate, Hunt is available in a lot of leagues, and Pacheco is someone you probably wouldn't have considered starting otherwise. Meanwhile, for stashes, and the return of Roschon Johnson had no impact on the Bears' depth chart at all. DeAndre Swift is the lead back, and Kyle Manangai is his backup. Johnson hasn't had a touch. While Mananga doesn't have the upside of many backups, I still think there's a borderline top 20 option in there with a Swift injury. But the key factor here is the possibility that he could take over the lead role on merit. Teams generally make these changes coming out of their bye weeks, meaning Mananga could be the starter by week 6. He's a worthwhile stash, even though he hasn't exactly been outplaying Swift. They're both struggling to the tune of about 3.5 yards per carry. Meanwhile, Samaje Perine went down with an injury last week, making Taj Brooks the clear Chase Brown backup. If Brown's play continues to crater, we may even see Brooks get some opportunities on merit. He's a worthwhile stash in deeper leagues where every backup must be rostered. Meanwhile, running backs get injured more than any other player in fantasy, with your average top 36 running back missing 2 games per season in fantasy. We've already seen that happen with James Conner this season. For that reason, your best bet in fantasy is to roster running backs who are an injury away from an every down role. Each week, I'll be listing my favorite running back stashes, only including players you wouldn't be starting most weeks. And this week, my list is once again top-ended by the likes of Zach Charbonnet, even though he's still battling with an injury, Blake Corum, who's a chance of taking over and is going to get a lot of volume if he gets that role due to an injury anyway, Brian Robinson in that 49ers offense, DJ Giddens appears to be clearly ahead of Tyler Goodson, which is why I've got him as one of my top options, because we know the Colts love to run the ball. Rashad White's always a good option if there's an injury. Ollie Gordon started to get the goal line work and clearly put himself ahead of Jalen Wright, which is always the big question mark, keeping me off him previously. Bashal Tuden, I mentioned, I don't really love him as a stash. I just think the upside's limited, but if you're desperate, he's an option. Braylon Allen, I feel pretty good about, but it's hard to know what's going to happen with Isaiah Davis if Breece Hall is out. Kendre Miller, but the Saints are kind of struggling, which is why I don't have him higher, even though I do think he's a good option. Rico Dowdle hasn't looked great, and the Panthers' run game hasn't looked as good as it previously has, but he's still a good stash. Kareem Hunt, I mentioned earlier. Ty Johnson appears to have gone past Ray Davis as the backup at this stage, getting a lot more early down work. We'll see what happens this week, but he's someone you can stash in a deeper league. Caleb Johnson's not even getting touches at the moment, but if you see a Jalen Warren injury, don't be surprised if he pops up. And with Najee Harris's injury, Hassan Haskins becomes the new backup at this stage, though he's not very exciting to me at all. Wide receiver-wise, and I don't really trust any Chargers receiver, not called Ladd McConkey, but there's clearly a heap of upside in this offense. I have, after all, been a massive fan of Quentin Johnston all preseason. I was even talking up Keenan Allen as well. LA faces a Giants defense that's conceded the second most points to opposing receivers this season. That makes both Keenan Allen and Quentin Johnston much stronger starts this week than most. If you're going to start them at all, this would be a good week to do it. But do be aware that even though they've had a good start to the season, I do think that they are more likely to crater than most, and their guys are more trading away than trading for. Meanwhile, Trey Tucker was the star for the Raiders in week 3, but Jacoby Myers is the clear wide receiver 1 for Geno Smith. Myers has 26 targets and is top 10 in receiving yards across all positions this season for the whole league. His lack of touchdowns has hidden his fantasy effectiveness, but he's a great start most weeks, given his safe floor and yardage upside. His lack of touchdowns shouldn't scare you away from starting him against the generous Bears secondary. He is the guy to own in this offense, not Tucker, who is simply a deep threat who's going to be very matchup specific. Meanwhile, I don't love this last option, but In a deeper league, I'm willing to risk Tyquan Thornton as a streamer for the Chiefs. Regardless of Xavier Worthy's status, Thornton seems to have surpassed Juju Smith-Schuster as the wide receiver 3. That's assuming Worthy's return, with Marquise Grant seeming to move more towards the slot. And there's some upside here in a possible shootout against the Ravens. Meanwhile, if you need stashes, and don't let last week's disappointment dissuade you, Troy Franklin is a strong fantasy option this season and is well worth stashing. He has a heap of upside if the Broncos' passing attack can finally get its act together. I know that Cortland Sutton's the clear number 1. We already knew that. But Troy Franklin is the very clear number 2, and he's going to have some good weeks. In most leagues, outside, say, a 10-teamer or an 8-teamer, he's got to be rostered, and I would like him to be on my roster. Meanwhile, this is around the time of the season where rookie receivers start to emerge. In this case, I think Luther Burden could easily become the starter coming out of the Chicago's Week 5 bye. But I also think it's possible Ben Johnson pulls the change early after a big Week 3 performance by the rookie. So, in a deeper league, I'd get in early and stash him just in case, though I wouldn't be going out of my way to drop good, reliable players for him. He's just an upside guy if you've got some spots due to guys going onto IR. Meanwhile, tight end wise, and Jake Ferguson is not typically a starter for me. I didn't like him at all going into the season, but the injury to CeeDee Lamb changes things drastically. This offense will run through Ferguson and George Pickens and the running backs. As a bonus, the Packers are oddly susceptible to tight ends, meaning this should be a good week to start Ferguson. Meanwhile, the 49ers are best attacked underneath as well, and Brendan Strange already has 16 targets this season. It's not an exciting name, but he was one of my favorites of the preseason, and he's had a number of 60-ish yard games and gives you more touchdown upside than Evan Ingram ever did. He doesn't have a touchdown yet this season, but he had plenty last season, so we know that that's possible. In a deeper league, he's a solid option. Meanwhile, if you need a stash, the Steelers have moved towards a 2 tight end heavy approach of late, meaning Jonnu Smith essentially becomes the 3rd wide receiver, maybe even the 2nd, depending on how you view Calvin Austin. That hasn't meant much so far, but I still think we could see that change through the Steelers bye week, given, as I keep saying, that's when the main changes get made. Meanwhile, kickers and DSTs, and the top kicker on the year so far is surprisingly Spencer Strader, with that Colts offense being amazing. And he faces a Rams defense that gives you a heap of field goals. This feels like a slam dunk, though. If you follow kickers, you would know there's no such thing. Meanwhile, the Bills are projected to be the league's high-scoring team by a whopping 5.5 points. They're projected for like 32.5 points. Next most is the Packers with like 27. That makes Matt Prater a fantastic floor start this week as their kicker. Meanwhile, DSTs and the Cleveland Browns keep on getting into Grindfest and are projected to score just 18 points this week. Given the Lions can shut down Joe Flacco's old team, I'm bringing them back to shut down his new team as well. And finally, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter against a rookie quarterback with limited weapons. That sounds like a lot of fun to me. So the Titans are projected to be the league's lowest scoring team this week. So naturally, I'm taking the Texans DST against them. And as always, please note, I won't be listing kicker and DST stashes. You should never put kickers or DSTs on your bench outside a dynasty league. There are just no exceptions at this stage in the season, so please just don't. And that is all we've got for the Week 4 Streamers and Stashes show. As always, pop those questions down below or hit me up on social media. Also, make sure you like and subscribe because I will have a Start Sit show coming up later in the week. Good luck for Week 4 in fantasy. I'll talk to you guys soon.